We are recording.
Hey all, welcome to our kilowatt hour about having an all-electric year, which is what I did in 2023 and 2024. And so we wanted to report out on how that went. And then Andy will be giving some tips for tools you can use if you're looking at going electric, whether partially or fully, and know what you're getting into, which of course people would like to before they pull the trigger on that. Um, okay. So, um, just let's start with the why, because that is important before this kind of decision. Um, and from the Electrify Central Ohio perspective, a big why is to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions that come from your household activities. So we put together sort of an example, a little pie chart here of how is a typical single family home Ohio household responsible for greenhouse gas emissions? And there's a couple big culprits and some smaller ones, but they're all important to think about. So as you can see here, the biggest one is cars. This would be for a two internal combustion engine car household and driving about 10,000 miles a year, which is typical. And that's more than half of your greenhouse gas emissions right there because this is the US and the Midwest and we drive a lot. Um, so that's a big piece to think about. And then getting into your actual home, the big three are going to be your heating. A lot of homes in Ohio are natural gas furnaces. So when you burn that natural gas, you are producing carbon dioxide. Also, as that natural gas gets to you, it can leak along the way, and that is methane, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas. So that red slice of the pie is all of that. Um, then that sort of gold yellow slice is air conditioning. It does get hot here in the summer sometimes, and more so thanks to climate change. So that's electricity, but to make that electricity requires some combustion of fossil fuels on the grid. So that gives you a slice. And then hot water heating. This is for a home with like a natural gas tank hot water heater. There are different variations on where that goes, but in terms of just raw energy usage, that'll be a big piece of it too, because everyone needs to shower and do dishes and wash hands and all those things that take hot water. And then we like to show, just for perspective, that cooking and clothes drying, which people, of course, have questions about, are actually a relatively tiny piece of the pie, but they're still in there. And we'll talk more later about why you might think about those two, even if they're not such a big proportion of greenhouse gas footprint. Okay, so all that said is like the starting point if you're working off fossil fuels, what can you do by going electric? The green here is the greenhouse gas reduction that you can get just from switching to electricity, not worrying about where that electricity is coming from. You can get rid of about half your annual greenhouse gas emissions. Um, and that's really because our electricity supply, even if you're just pulling off the grid without worrying about where it's coming from, is relatively clean compared to, burning natural gas or using that for supply or using petroleum gas to power your car. And so just by making that switch, you reduce your overall footprint. And of course, there's stuff you can do to make sure that electricity is coming from lower carbon sources, which help you even more. But for this purpose of this conversation, it's just what can you do by going electric? And you could, to break it down real quick, you can see that sort of brownish piece that was cars in the last pie is like way smaller. So EVs, EVs, EVs. Uh, and then that sort of stripy red and yellow one, that is if you use what's called a heat pump in place of your AC unit. It's just an AC unit that can also run in reverse and heat your home. And then you can, if you would like, get rid of your furnace. Then by combining those two into one, powering it up with electricity, you can reduce by some amount. And then the other piece to look at there is that light blue, which is the hot water. You can get a lot of reduction in greenhouse gas emissions there. You can see that clothes drying and cooking don't really change a lot, but that's where it's really giving yourself the option of once you've switched to electricity, if you can get that electricity from low carbon or carbon-free sources, then you can reduce the climate impact of those. Okay, so that's all hopefully sounds great and wonderful and something you might be interested in doing. It takes some planning. That is one of our really sort of big propositions is if you want to do this, you can, but a plan is important. So things to consider: timing. A lot of these things involve replacing major appliances, or in the case of cars, that's a big purchase too. So you're not just going to go out and do that tomorrow. Oh, I want a new car. Yay. So you need to think through sort of when it makes sense to make this type of switch. Then there's installation costs, especially if you're going to be looking at financing options, sort of like when does it make sense for your household budget to do this kind of thing? And also, are there steps you can take to reduce installation costs? Can you take advantage of tax credits? Can you, while you're getting electrical work done, bundle in things that you want to do for your sort of long-term plan and avoid, get economies of scale basically on electrical work, things like that. Utility bills, I can tell you that, doing this kind of thing can affect your utility bills, and we can, as Andy will talk about, help you understand what that might look like, at least directionally, because the last thing I think anyone wants is a surprise utility bill that they weren't expecting. And also to know, like, what are the things that just might reduce your bills. That's always great too. Panel and wiring, I was talking about electrical work. Anytime you're switching from fossil fuel to electric for something in your home, you need to make sure that you've got the electric supply in place where it's needed. So for example, if you're switching from natural gas for hot water heating and you want to switch to electric tank, like a heat pump, that is totally doable, but that is just going to need the right wiring in place. So you got to make sure that that's there. And then financial incentives. This is part of the reason we're here, is to help you know, are there tax credits or rebates or other things that you can tap into to make all of this a little bit more affordable and to help it make sense for your household. Okay, so this is the part where we just sort of get into the anecdotal world of, how does this go? What does it look like? Everyone's situation is going to be different. But I think it's also sort of just helps you think through it to hear about what one person's experience is, hopefully maybe increase your comfort level that I have been through this, and actually it turned out pretty well, I think. At least I would say other people should at least consider going down this path. Just want to talk to you a little bit about what that looks like. And I will say, and get more into this later, we did this on an accelerated time frame versus what someone normal might do, just so that I could guinea pig it to be part of Electrify Central Ohio and be able to talk to folks about it. But all of these are steps that you might take as part of a long-term plan. So what we did is, we're a family of four, me, my husband, two kids. We each have a car because we have commutes, etc. So both of those were internal combustion engine running on gas. We have switched both of those to plug-in electric vehicles. We had actually already electric water heating, but it was electric resistance, which is like old school traditional run electricity through a wire and create heat. And it is incredibly inefficient. And if I had known as much as I do now when we moved into this house, we would have done it earlier. But we switched those over to a heat pump We had two 40-gallon tanks, and we switched to one 80-gallon tank with a heat pump, power source, and then electric resistance backup just in case. And that is like 4 or 5, 6 times more efficient. And so that was a real beneficial move just in terms of, yes, it's still running on electricity, but a lot less electricity. Then we had a natural gas furnace, as many people do in this part of the world. We switched that to, or we took that out. And our air conditioner, we have a centrally ducted system, an outdoor unit compressor. We switched that to a heat pump, which looks exactly the same as our old outdoor unit, almost exactly, except it can also move heat in addition to moving it out in the summer. So that's what we use to heat our home now. We do have, for the very, very, very coldest days, when that heat pump gets less efficient, we have what are called heat strips. Again, that sort of resistance heat inside in our air handler that can sort of boost us up when we really need it. And we use those, maybe a couple weeks out of the year. The rest of the time we're using the heat pump, which again, and we can get more into this maybe in the Q&A, it's just a much more efficient way of heating because it moves heat that already exists to where you want it instead of burning fossil fuels to create heat. And then last but not least, we had a gas range, which talk a little more about. It's a nice gas range. My husband loves it. He's our chef. It took some convincing. We switched to an induction range, which is like an electromagnetic coil that heats pots and pans through electromagnetism, magnets, yay. And actually he's a total convert, which I also like to mention to people because this is not his thing. He was like, I don't care where we're getting what power source we're using. I want to be able to cook and I want to have it turn out how I want. And he's loves it at this point. He's like, that's great. I'm glad we made this change. Okay, so this stuff costs money. People care about that. So we like to be pretty straightforward in talking about it. And give you a peek into our household financing. So how much did it cost to put all this stuff in? Induction range was about $1,500. That's generally, it's a little bit more of a luxury item now. You don't really have like the bottom of the line models. Those are maybe starting to come out and coming out more. So you might be able to get like a standard electric or a gas range for cheaper, but it's not a huge premium over, just whatever you might install if you weren't thinking about climate type stuff. Heat pump water heater, that was $2,700. This is incorporating the benefit of there's a federal tax credit for up to 30% of installation costs for that. So that was not too bad compared to like what just a normal replacement would cost. The heat pump, did a little bit of math here just to contextualize. So the all-in cost for this, pull out the furnace, replace the AC with the heat pump, and basically switch over all of our HVAC it actually cost about $23,000. To my mind, the comparison point for that is, okay, at some point you're going to have to replace those things anyway. So how much more is it versus that like for like replacement that you would do at end of life? And in that framework, it's about $8,000 of a premium to get the heat pump. And I should note that we had some ductwork done as part of this too, which was part of that cost, and it sort of all goes into the mix there. Level 2 charging, which is something that you might want if you're switching over to an EV. This is the one thing. So we had a chance to get this put in when the house was built, and so we had done that. And I don't have a dollar figure for that. If you're doing it new in an existing garage or house, like getting just the this is basically like your dryer outlet, 240 volt, getting that done in the $1,000 range. There's a lot of factors involved, and if you're getting actual like special charging equipment put in, so that's something that you want to sort of look at and budget for. For us, it was sort of already taken care of. So all that is the upfront cost, and then of course there's the question of what does that mean for our household budget over the time we're living here, which we find to be a long time. Um, so the switching over the hot water heating was a big win. That's just from a less efficient thing to a more efficient thing. And that got us a chunk of about almost $300 in savings by my calculations, by getting our hot water more efficiently. The thing that we try to really just talk to people about and make sure that you understand is that if you're switching from gas to electric heat, that can bump up your annual operating costs quite a bit. Andy will talk more about why that is. It's sort of not necessarily because gas is cheaper than electricity, but the way our gas and electric rates work in Ohio, it looks cheaper. Is how I think of it. So we did see a pretty big jump in our winter electric bills. And that's something that actually I'm hoping to bring down because I'm learning to run the heat pump more effectively because I can answer some questions about that, but you don't want to set your thermostat necessarily the same way as you would if you're running off a furnace. But our January, February bills, when you get those like polar vortex weeks that get really cold, is when you end up having to use those backup heat strips because the heat pump is less efficient. And those heat strips are less efficient. You use more kilowatt hours, your bills will get more expensive. As I'll get to down there, you can make up for that. The EVs next in line, that's also can be a huge win. I will say me and my husband both drive a fair bit. We're both about 15,000 miles a year on average. And so we saw a big gain because actually charging your cars with electricity is cheaper than going to the gas pump. So we got a big savings in fuel costs. This does not, I will say, incorporate maintenance costs because like I don't have to get my oil changed. I don't have oil because I don't have an engine. So that's sort of a nice plus there. And then as I was saying, in Ohio, we have these natural gas service charges, which are a fixed amount you pay every month for the privilege of being the customer of your gas utility. Those are almost $50 a month if you're Columbia Gas. They're going up. And so one thing that we made the decision to do, and part of what drove us to go fully electric is to say, we don't want to pay $50 a month to be your customer. We're going to get rid of anything that uses natural gas, cut service, and save that fixed cost that we would pay every month, no matter how much gas we use, whether we're using 1 CCF in the summer for our gas range, or 100 CCF in the winter for our furnace. And so that saves us about $600 a year currently. Those savings will increase as those fixed charges go up, which they are scheduled to do. And so I like to highlight that because that is something that really balances out that increase in the winter bills. Because I can say, look, I may be paying a few hundred more in January, but I'm saving that amount over the rest of the year. So that is a nice thing. Okay, so some things I want to highlight here. Obviously, this is complicated, which again is part of why we exist, to help you think through all these things. But some stuff that I think is important. Just thinking about overall, all in, we live our lives all electric now. How much does that cost us per year, under $5,000. That is all our utility bills, no longer gas, but just electric, which also now encompasses powering our cars. So we don't pay anything to Exxon or whoever for fueling up for transportation. So that's, all told, not actually that bad. If you look at someone who's not living all electric in terms of, annual energy costs for a normal Midwestern family life, that's sort of in line. It's not like tripling your cost of living or anything like that. So if someone tries to tell you that's what's going to happen, probably not. Something that makes me happy is that because all of that is going to our electric bills, we have gotten rid of $4,000 or more a year that we were paying for various forms of fossil fuel supply. And so for me, as someone who cares about climate change, I'm glad to not be paying to increase greenhouse gas emissions. And actually, all of our electric supply, we have solar, which I've sort of left out of this equation because it makes things even more complicated. But we also have renewable electricity aggregation for our grid supply. So we are theoretically net zero. Something else I want to highlight is that there are two things that were just sort of no-brainers, which is switch to EVs and have a more efficient hot water heater. Even if we didn't want to go all electric, those totally would have made sense for us. Again, maybe for save details for the Q&A, there's this question of, do you go all electric or do you keep a natural gas furnace backup? That was a long discussion. We went all electric. There's reasons you might keep natural gas backup. We can talk you through those. And then just the not dollars and cents piece, but I think important. Cooking with induction is great. I like not cleaning the natural gas burners. It's quiet. People like driving EVs. They have great pickup. And our HVAC still works great. We can do road trips. We have done a number with EVs. The charging network is there if you need it. And then we actually, as I said, do have solar that I did a little bit of math to pretend we didn't have solar for the costs. Actually, all of the stuff I talked about has been cheaper for us because our solar electricity is cheaper. I just pretended we would pay what you would if you get off the grid. And so if you can put in solar and use that for your electricity supply, you can save a bunch of money. So that's my bit. And now I'll turn over to Andy. Hopefully it didn't take too long to talk about how all of this can apply for you.
All right, thank you. Just set up a couple of things real quick. Can everyone see my screen? Are we good? Awesome. All right, so I think Madeline did a really great job of setting up sort of expectations, and what we want to show off now is ways that you can calculate the impact on your annual and monthly utility bills. I think there's a lot of concern before you take the plunge into some new appliance. What's this going to look like? I know what it costs to buy the equipment and to get it installed, but what are my bills going to look like? So we've done a lot of work trying to figure all this out. And I'm going to walk you through it. So, Madeline hit a bunch of this, but I think it's important to think about goals and expectations. So, of course, generally the goals for doing these things are to reduce the carbon footprint, to support a clean energy transition, and to adopt more efficient appliances. But when it gets to expectations, how much are you willing to spend to meet these goals? And one of the things that is often challenging for advocates of electrification is that there's a lot of information out there suggesting that you'll save a ton of money if you switch to electric. And that's not always the case in every place that you might live in the US. It has gotten substantially cheaper. That's one of the reasons why we are here as Electrify Central Ohio. But we want to make sure that you have the right expectations going into this. And if you weren't told anything at all, and you were just simply asked, how much more might you be willing to spend on your utility bills to dramatically reduce your carbon footprint? And I'm hopeful that what we find today is that it's really not that much of an impact, and it's probably within what you might expect. In many cases, people will save money. Some cases they'll spend a little bit more, but it really depends on your approach to this. So as Madeline mentioned, one of the greatest ways you can save money by switching over is entirely getting rid of your natural gas account. But in general, we find that it leads to cheaper or slightly more expensive utility bills. So just to get into a little bit more detail of why you can save so much money if you disconnect natural gas, here is a copy of my gas bill from one of the recent months where I'm still on gas heat. We are getting our heat pump sometime in the near future. We've just been waiting for the right time to do so. Everything else in our house is electric at this point. But I want you to focus on these little charges and fees here. If you add this up, before you use a single ounce, or in better terms, cubic foot of natural gas, you're already paying $52 a month on your Columbia gas bill if you're in the Columbus area. And that really adds up. And that number is going to go to about $58 a year by 2026 to 2028. So it's quite a bit of money to be mostly electric and still have something that's natural gas. As I mentioned, somewhere between 2026 and 2028, they'll rise to $58, $59. What's interesting is in Columbus, your usage-based charges per hundreds of cubic feet, CCF, is only 55 cents. And as I'll show you, the national average is way more than that. So I think that we have an artificially low usage-based price compared to our fixed charges. So these artificially low charges kind of give us a low incentive to even conserve energy. It's especially hard. You're paying the same amount in fixed charges if you live in a 600 square foot apartment compared to a 5,000 square foot home that needs like hundreds of feet of pipeline just to reach the house. So I'm not here to comment on that, but it's worth thought. So most importantly for today, if you're trying to electrify your home, the greatest gains are realized when you can disconnect your natural gas account. Okay, so we'll talk about that. I'll show you predictions for how much your bill will change for a variety of things, depending on if you keep your gas account disconnected or even turn it off for, let's say, 6 months a year. So these calculators were developed by us. I do have a little bit of background in scientific methods and data analysis and such. That's my day job. And I've used that to develop these calculators. So these calculators are customized for people living in the Columbus area, and it uses your own gas bill. You can input your monthly usage over the course of a year, and we use a full year of Columbus temperature data that I was able to download on an hourly basis from government websites. And we'll customize it to specific products. We can change that if you're looking at a particular heat pump. There's a database we can look up to check out its efficiency at different temperature ranges, and we can plug that into our calculator. So yeah, that's the preview. So the big piece, as Madeline covered, aside from EVs, which we don't really need a calculator for, inside under your roof in your home, the big piece is the heat pump. And the big decision is what your backup source of heating will be when the temperatures get really low. If you choose electric resistance or natural gas, that will impact things just a little bit. So we'll enter your full year of natural gas, and then we'll choose if you'll be disconnecting your gas account. And we've got a lot of other parameters in here. So I'm going to switch over to the calculator. I think I'm switching over to the calculator. Here we go. So this is what it looks like. It's basically a Google sheet. There's a lot of tabs here that have all the calculations under the hood, including temperature data and so on. And we've got some instructions here, but I'm going to walk you through it. So this is actually a house that uses a fairly low amount. I forgot to update this. I'm going to punch in these numbers right now. So let's say I'm taking someone's electric bill, and this is one of my this is our electric bill. We live in an old house, so it needs a lot of heating. There's some pretty interesting things about our electric bill. I mean, natural gas bill. When I put in the month of January, this actually comes on my February bill, but this is the gas that I used in the month of January. We're above average in our usage, but you're probably noticing that in the summer months, we basically are doing nothing. And that's because everything except for heat in my house is electric. And this was really fascinating to me, just as an aside. I got my gas bill and it had 1 CCF of usage in the month of July. And I figured, oh, that's just a rounding error, whatever. Next month, 1 CCF of usage. The following month, 1 CCF of usage. Then I started to think, okay, there's a gas leak in my house. It's a slow leak, maybe just a pinhole. So I went around with a gas meter, and guess what? I found a slow leak in one of the spots near where the hookup used to be to my gas dryer, where we now have an electric dryer. So we called the plumber. They fixed it all up, and then we're good to go after that. So that was surprising. This is our data from 2023. In 2024, we've had straight zeros through those summer months. But anyway, I put this all in, and then I enter the efficiency of my current furnace, because that helps us determine how much actual energy you need to push into your house to heat it. And it also takes hourly temperature data across the year to figure out just how much your specific house needs energy-wise to increase by 1 degree. And then we can do some fun things working backwards, figuring out how efficient is the heat pump that you want. And if you go on a database, which we can provide, then it actually tells you what its relative efficiency is. And these numbers are, one would be 100% efficient. So right now my gas furnace is very efficient. It's 97% efficient. It cannot exceed 100% because it's burning stuff to make heat. But here you can get much higher than 100%. This is 198% efficient because you're simply moving heat. And as it gets warmer outside, the efficiency goes up and up. There's some other numbers here that I won't explain right now, but here's an important one. How much do you currently pay per kilowatt hour for your electricity? For most people in this Zoom room, it would be 17.9 cents per kilowatt hour. But that number can change depending on whether you went on shopping on apples to apples, or what your municipality's aggregation agreement is, or if you have solar. If you have solar, the effective electric rate goes down. It's a lot cheaper, and it'll continue to get cheaper compared to the utility rate as time goes on. And I can answer some questions about that if you have any. The gas rate, so as I mentioned already, it's pretty cheap. It's 55 cents per CCF. And then we can calculate from that what the fixed gas charges are per year. Right now it's I just assumed in this one, in a couple years time, it's going to be $59. So I just use that number to project out if you're thinking along multiple years. And this number is interesting. We're talking about multiple different appliances that you could replace. So if you're trying to figure out the cost of switching over, then you want to not, so if you're cutting off your gas line, you want to distribute that across the different things rather than take that multiple times. But we could set this to 100%. If everything's already electric and you want to calculate the impact, you would say all of the savings I get from closing my gas account will go towards the heat pump. But your heating usually uses about 62% of your natural gas bill. So that's why I set it at that number for purposes of today. And then what's your backup going to be? We talked about this. You can keep your natural gas furnace, or you could get electric resistance. Right now, this is written for natural gas, but we'll play around with it and switch it around. And if you have natural gas, you can decide at what point you want to switch from your heat pump to natural gas. So at 32 degrees, and I'll explain this in a little bit more detail, that's a relatively high number if you have a really efficient heat pump. But you can switch it over at 20 degrees, 10 degrees, wherever your heat pump is still able to keep up. The more time you're spending using your heat pump, then the more fossil fuels you're not burning. So are you disconnecting your natural gas service? Well, you can't if you have natural gas furnace as a backup. But there's something that you can do if heating is the only source of natural gas that you have left in your house, then you can disconnect your gas account for 6 months out of the year. There's going to be a reactivation fee. It's $50, which is put in here. So for 6 months, you're not paying the $59 a month. And then for that last month, when you call them to turn it back on, it's a $50 reconnection fee. So you will save several $100s a year, and we can put that into our calculator. But right now, you're keeping your natural gas going and so on. So here's the results. There's a lot of stuff here, and I'll be able to talk about this later. But this is a really important number. We take your usage and the efficiency of your furnace, and we figure out how many BTUs, which is just a measure of energy, do you need to heat your house if you don't change anything at all, if you don't insulate more, if you don't add air sealing or anything like that. And then we plug that in to figure out how much energy the heat pump will need. And if you keep the gas furnace as a backup, how much will it need? So what you can see is that if we add these two numbers together, it's a lot lower than the 76 because the heat pump is just so efficient. So, this is coming out to about 55 million BTUs instead of 76. But remember how we talked about how there's a switchover point? So if we change that to 20 degrees, then you can see that these numbers change a little bit. And now we're only using about 32 million BTUs, which is way less than half of 76. So we can play around with that, but that's going to affect how much we're paying, essentially. But we can figure out, all right, well, how much of a reduction in your piped natural gas do you have? And, if you're switching over at like 15 degrees, even though you have natural gas furnaces backup, you're still reducing your natural gas usage by 94%. So this is where people start thinking, all right, maybe I will keep my natural gas furnace as a backup because I'm virtually eliminating most of the combustion of fossil fuels in my home. And some people still like to have natural gas. For instance, if you have a power outage, you don't need that much energy if you have some sort of generator or battery backup. You don't need as much energy to keep a natural gas furnace going because you just need to power the fan. And I could talk about that in the Q&A as well. But we'll start to look at, I'm going to put this back to 32 so we can look at how it affects what you pay. This calculator also tells you
Andy,
how much.
I'll just do a quick time check. I think because I took too much time. We're at 7:53, so
Okay, I'll try to wrap this quickly. I know we
yeah,
started at
no,
like
keep going.
7:18, but we started a little bit late. But yeah, sorry for all the detail. But the other calculators will be much faster. But this right here tells you how much electricity you can expect to increase on your electric bill, which is important. Let's say you're planning for solar or something like that. But overall, the way I've got this set up right now for a house that's using a lot of heat like my own, it's a pretty big difference. It's $765 extra per year the way I've got it set up. Now I'll just show you if we change a few numbers. For example, with solar, we're paying about 14 cents a kilowatt hour. So I just changed that. And then if we disconnect our natural gas for half of the year, we put this part year, and then it's disconnected for 6 months. Now the difference is only $154 a year. So I hope that illustrates what's going on. We have these other charts that we can show you. How much are you paying to heat your house with different methods, depending on what the outdoor temperature is. And I can walk through those during the Q&A. So if I just switch back real quick to the calculator, the overview, the next thing is hot water, then it's dryer, then it's cooking. We made some assumptions about what kind of hot water heater you'll use. This is the one that both Madeline and I have. The dryer, there's some really nice, well-rated heat pump dryers. Samsung has one that's, if you've got a big family, 7.5 cubic feet. It looks a lot like the ones that you can either get standard electric or gas, but they're extremely efficient. And I think they cost about $1,100 based on what I've seen recently. Cooking, we have something like this. Okay, so then I'll just show you those calculators real quick. So we've got the water heater calculator. We've got some, again, we can bake in some assumptions based on what you're paying for your electric and gas rate and so on. And what you can see is with a typical usage level, the net change you would have if you're disconnecting your gas completely would be you're saving $60 a year. If you disconnect for 6 months, it's about a $5 difference. And if you're keeping your gas and not disconnecting at all, it's going to be a little more expensive. But that's just for these numbers right here. And I just remembered I didn't go over the fully electric case for the heat pump. Let me just switch back to that real quick, because I can't forget that. If you go to electric resistance backup, and then you completely get rid of your natural gas service, then in that case, it's about $160 different for a fairly high usage house. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so I did the water heater, the dryer, we've got a calculator for that as well. Just to cut to the chase here with a typical electric rate, it's really not going to be that much of a difference in any case, but disconnecting saves you money and you pay a little bit more if you keep your gas connection. Finally, there's the oven range. I actually just made this calculator in the last couple days. So this is if you get one of those induction slide-in things, then your cooking costs don't really change noticeably in any direction, whatever your scenario is. So if we go back to here, I just want to put it all together, and we can summarize different scenarios across all the calculators that I just showed you. So if you disconnect your gas, this was a slightly different usage number, but in any case, if you're able to go all electric and disconnect your gas, you're really not changing that much in terms of how much you're spending each year in your utility bill. That's with a typical electric rate. If you disconnect for 6 months, also you're not changing that much if you're keeping your gas backup for your furnace. But if you don't disconnect at all, you can see that it will have a significant impact on your bill. So in the long run, we encourage people to see if they can figure out a way to go fully electric, and that will, or at least fully electric except for your furnace. That would make a big difference. If you have solar, you're paying less for your electricity. So these scenarios would be something more like this. This is probably more along the lines of what Madeline is doing, except she doesn't even use as much for her heating as this example. But overall, her utilities as a whole are likely to be cheaper by about $170. You break even with a 6-month disconnect. And then if you don't disconnect, it's still noticeably larger per year. The last thing I want to show you, smaller and more efficient homes save more. So remember how I talked about millions of BTU? So this is how much energy you need for your heating. This is just for your heating, not for your full home. If this is a fairly low amount, which many people, I've seen lots of bills and many people are in this range. This is my house, and this is a super heavy usage house. This is with like a lot of standard assumptions, but what you can basically see is that the less you use, the less your utility bills are going to change. And this is just for heating, not for all the other stuff. So the best thing we can recommend is, if you're curious, talk to us. We'll walk you through the calculators. So to summarize all of it, we can calculate your annual heating load. Your monthly bill need not change noticeably at all, depending on how you set this up. And the most favorable scenarios are realized if you can disconnect your natural gas account either completely or for part of the year, if your house uses less energy than the average, if it's either more efficient or smaller, then you're likely to be in a position to save money by going electric. And if you have something like solar, which makes your electric rate cheaper, you'll be in a better position as well. And again, we're here. We'll very happily help you with all these calculators to feel confident about your decision to switch over and understand how it's going to impact your bills. So it's exactly 8 o'clock, and we can hang out for Q&A. So what I'll do is I'll stop the recording. We're going to post this online, and people will be able to refer to it later. But we'll stick around for any Q&A that people might have. So I'll stop that recording right now. Great.